On October 14, 1944, Erwin Rommel confided in his 15-year-old son, revealing he had only 15 minutes left to live. Hitler had dispatched 2 generals to their home with a grim ultimatum: swallow cyanide or face a show trial that would utterly ruin their entire family. Rommel chose the poison. But what truly sets this story apart from every other Nazi downfall is that this 15-year-old boy would spend the next 70 years, music swells, transforming the name Rommel into a symbol that his father's regime would have undoubtedly despised. It became a symbol not of military conquest, but of tolerance, reconciliation, and liberal democracy. To discover more about the figures of World War II, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. October 14, 1944, began like any other day at Villa Rommel in Herlingen. Erwin was recuperating from severe head injuries, sustained 3 months prior when Allied planes strafed his car. He walked with difficulty, his left eye unable to close completely, but he had survived, and that had become a significant problem for the Nazi regime. By noon, 2 generals, Wilhelm Burgdorf and Ernst Mazel, arrived. They were not there to inquire about his recovery. Rommel met with them privately for nearly an hour. When he emerged, his face was devoid of emotion. He went upstairs to find his wife, Lucy, and what he told her would make her a widow within the next hour. Afterward, he found Manfred. He explained that dying at the hands of his countrymen was difficult to accept, but their home was surrounded, and Hitler was accusing him of treason. This accusation stemmed from the July 20th plot, the failed assassination attempt on Hitler. Rommel had known some of the conspirators. Whether he was directly involved remains a subject of historical debate, but Hitler had decided he was guilty, and Hitler's decisions were immutable. Rommel presented the choice he had been given. If he took cyanide, his death would be, music swells, officially announced as complications from his wounds, and he would receive a full state funeral with military honors. His family would be protected, their pensions secured. But if he refused, if he demanded a trial, all those he loved would bear the consequences. The Nazis had made it abundantly clear what happened to the families of traitors. At 12:15 p.m., Rommel told his son he would be dead within 15 minutes. Outside, Gestapo agents waited in the surrounding woods. If Rommel attempted to resist or flee, they had orders to shoot. Cyanide was not truly a choice. It was a staged illusion of choice, designed to allow the regime to disclaim responsibility. Rommel put on his African tunic. He picked up his field marshal's baton. He bid farewell to his wife and son, then stepped out to the waiting car with Burgdorf and Mazel. They drove a short distance down the road and stopped. At 12:35 p.m., the phone rang at Villa Herlingen. Rommel was dead. The official cause would be listed as a cerebral embolism resulting from his July injuries. A 15-year-old boy now carried one of the war's most dangerous secrets. Germany's greatest general had been murdered by his own government, and to speak that truth could mean the death of his entire family. The state funeral was a complete fabrication. For days later, tens of thousands lined the streets of Ulm, silently bidding farewell. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt delivered the eulogy, praising Rommel's devotion to the Führer and the fatherland. The coffin was draped in the Nazi flag. Military bands played solemn tunes. It was one of the grandest wartime state funerals. Yet every word spoken was a lie. The Nazi regime had afforded Rommel full military honors while concealing the truth that they had forced him to commit suicide by poison. They lauded his loyalty even as they accused him of treason. They celebrated his service while his body still contained the poison they had compelled him to swallow. Lucy and Manfred stood at the funeral, privy to the chilling truth. They watched the crowds mourn a fallen hero. They listened to speeches honoring a man the regime had just murdered. They could not utter a word, not out of cowardice, but because the very same people who had killed Erwin would also kill them. The promised protection, the pension, the safety, all depended on their silence. To speak out meant death, and Rommel had taken the poison precisely so they wouldn't have to face that. The truth would have to wait. The teenage witness speaks. 6 months later, the war was nearing its end. French forces swept into southwestern Germany in April 1945. Manfred, now 16, had been conscripted into the Reichsarbeitsdienst, the National Labor Service. As the Allies advanced, he made a decision: desert. But the French army still captured him, along with thousands of other German youths. He was processed as a prisoner of war and held for interrogation. However, his name caught someone's attention: Rommel, son of the Desert Fox. General Jean de Lattre de Tassigny, commander of the French First Army, wanted to speak with him privately. De Lattre had faced Rommel in North Africa. He respected the field marshal's military genius, even as an enemy. Now, he wanted to know what truly happened in October 1944. Manfred could have remained silent. He could have simply repeated the official story of brain complications. He was 16, a prisoner of war, surrounded by the forces that had just conquered his country. He had every reason to say nothing. Instead, he told the truth. He described the general's arrival at noon, his father's calm explanation of the ultimatum, the choice between poison and a rigged trial, the final 15 minutes, the waiting Gestapo agents, and the phone call confirming the death. His testimony became one of the first credible accounts confirming that the Nazi regime had coerced its officers into suicide. The boy who had witnessed his father's death became a witness to history. By August 1945, he was released from the POW camp and returned to his mother. Manfred's revelation exposed the brutality of the Nazi regime to the Allies in a way official documents never could. A teenage boy describing his father's final morning in plain language carried more weight than any intelligence report. But there was another secret the family had kept hidden for decades. A secret that would not become public until 2001. It would complicate the carefully constructed image of Rommel as a noble general with a perfect private life. The secret daughter. In 2001, a Sunday Times investigation uncovered personal letters, revealing a secret the Rommel family had kept for nearly 90 years: soft music. Erwin Rommel had fathered a daughter in 1913 before his marriage to Lucy. The child's mother was Walburga Stemmer, a fruit vendor in Waiblingen. Their relationship was deep enough for Rommel to propose, but his family objected, deeming Walburga unsuitable for an ambitious young officer. The relationship ended, but the child, a daughter named Gertrude, remained. They did not abandon Gertrude. Instead, she was introduced to relatives as a cousin, and she maintained contact with the family throughout her life. She often visited Lucy and Manfred, even after Erwin's death. This connection endured for decades. Walburga died in 1928, officially from pneumonia. Historians have since scrutinized the circumstances of her death, suspecting suicide, believing she despaired over losing Rommel to Lucy and the life she might have had. This revelation did not destroy Rommel's legacy, but it added layers of complexity. The general whose image was meticulously managed during the war, the honorable commander and devoted family man, had a secret past the regime's propaganda machine would never have tolerated. The Rommel myth was not just military propaganda. It extended to his private life as well. Gertrude outlived them all. She passed away in 2000, just before the Sunday Times investigation publicly revealed her existence. She carried the secret of her father to her grave, connected to the family but never publicly acknowledged. Lucy's 27 years of silence, soft music. Lucy Maria Rommel outlived her husband by 27 years. She endured the occupation, the division of Germany, the economic miracle, and the long process of coming to terms with what her country had wrought. Born in 1894 to a Polish-Italian family, she was educated in Danzig and spoke multiple languages. She was not merely a general's wife. She, soft music, was an intelligent woman, acutely aware of everything unfolding around her. She knew what the regime had done to her husband. Soft music, she knew what they were capable of doing. After the war, she faced the peculiar burden of being the widow of a Nazi general. Soft music, in a country desperately trying to forget that Nazism had ever existed. Denazification courts scrutinized everyone connected to the regime. Families of former generals faced examination, suspicion, soft music, and sometimes prosecution. Lucy navigated it all. She never wrote memoirs. She rarely gave interviews. She did not embark on speaking tours to defend her husband's reputation or attack his enemies. She simply endured. Her silence was not weakness. It was a strategy. To speak out meant becoming part, soft music, of the narrative. It meant having to defend, explain, justify. Instead, Lucy chose to let her husband's military record speak, soft music, for itself, while she raised her son and lived as private a life as possible. She passed away, soft music, In 1971, at the age of 77, having witnessed Manfred mature from a traumatized teenager who saw his father die into a respected political figure, her quiet endurance became a unique form of witness. A woman who chose dignity over display, who carried an unimaginable legacy without being crushed by it. When Manfred finally rose to prominence, he carried not only his famous father's name, but also his mother's example of how to live with the weight of history. The son who inverted a legacy. Here is where the story takes its most unexpected turn. Manfred Rommel could have shied away from his name. He could have changed it, left Germany, started anew somewhere his father's shadow couldn't reach. Many children of Nazi figures did precisely that. They disappeared into ordinary lives, their famous names buried under married names or new identities. Manfred did the opposite. In 1974, he ran for mayor of Stuttgart and won. He held that office continuously for 22 years, becoming one of the most respected political figures in modern German history. But he didn't just survive in politics despite his name. He used it, not soft music, to honor his father's era, but to actively repudiate every value that era represented. He championed immigrant integration when many German politicians opposed it. He established the Stuttgart Pact for Integration, bringing together government, businesses, and community organizations to support newcomers. He tolerated dissent. He promoted reconciliation. Soft music. He built a political career founded on the very values the Nazi regime had tried to destroy. Then, soft music, came 1977. The Red Army faction, West Germany's most feared terrorist group, kidnapped and murdered industrialist Hans-Martin Schleyer. Soft music. In response, the German government took a hardline stance. When several Red Army faction members died in Stammheim prison that October, officially by suicide, their bodies needed burial. Not a single cemetery in Germany would accept them. Local authorities refused. The terrorists' families could find no place to inter their deceased loved ones. Manfred Rommel, son of Hitler's field marshal, authorized their burial in Stuttgart. The backlash was immediate and fierce. Critics accused him of honoring terrorists. His political opponents called it a betrayal. How could the son of Germany's greatest military hero shelter the bodies of murderers? His reasoning was simple. Reconciliation requires acts of reconciliation. The dead were dead. Their crimes had ended. To deny them burial would only perpetuate hatred. Someone had to break the cycle. And he was willing, soft music, to be that person. This was precisely the kind of decision his father's regime would have scorned. And that was precisely its meaning. The Rommel name was no longer linked to Nazism, but to its deliberate rejection. The son inverted everything his father's era stood for, not by fleeing history, but by confronting it head-on and choosing a different path. The airport and the transformation complete. In 2014, Stuttgart made a decision that in 1945 would have been unimaginable. They renamed their airport, not after Erwin Rommel, the famed general whose tanks swept across North Africa, not after the Desert Fox, whose military reputation endured even as his regime crumbled. They renamed the airport after Manfred Rommel, the mayor. The city declared that Manfred Rommel represented tolerance, reconciliation, and openness to the world more than anyone else in Stuttgart's modern history. These were the values they wanted their airport to embody. Consider the significance of that. In 1944, the name Rommel represented Hitler's war machine. It appeared on propaganda posters. It was celebrated by a regime that murdered millions. It belonged to a man who led conquering armies across 3 continents. 70 years later, the name Rommel was honored again, but for entirely opposite reasons. For tolerance instead of conquest. For reconciliation instead of division. For openness instead of authoritarianism. The son's legacy overshadowed the father's by inverting every value it once represented. An airport named Rommel, but for reasons no one in 1944 could have possibly imagined. Manfred passed away in 2013, a year before the airport was renamed. He was 84 years old. He dedicated his entire adult life to proving that a name does not determine destiny, that what you inherit is less important than what you choose to do with it. The paradox of transformation. The Rommel family story inverted every expectation at each turn. A forced suicide, intended to silence a potential traitor, instead preserved his legacy because the Nazis lied about it. And eventually, the truth came out. A 15-year-old witness who should have remained silent became history's truth-teller, confirming Nazi brutality to Allied interrogators when he could have simply repeated the official story. A widow's silence became dignity rather than complicity. She endured without apology, survived without explanation. A secret daughter complicated a carefully constructed myth, yet did not shatter the family who quietly acknowledged her for decades. And a son transformed a Nazi name into a symbol of liberal democracy, not by running from it, not by hiding it, but by doing the opposite of everything it once represented. What happened to the Rommel family after World War II was not destruction. It was not disgrace. It was not the generational collapse that befell so many families connected to Nazism. It was a transformation. And that happened because a teenage boy, who watched his father die at the hands of the regime, made a different choice about what to do with the legacy he inherited. He could have let the name Rommel die with his father's generation. Instead, he spent 70 years giving it new meaning. Thank you for watching. If you found this story compelling, please check out our other deep dives into families who lived in the shadow of World War II. Their choices, their silences, and the legacies they built from the ruins. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell for more history.